Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Melissa and I am a registered nurse. So today's video is going to be a very informal coffee and chat. I'm actually not drinking coffee, I'm drinking peppermint tea in one of my favorite mugs. It says blessed, hopefully you guys can see it. But in today's video, I'm going to be giving a very honest review of my experience, like my overall experience at Chamberlain University. If you have not seen my previous videos, I attended Chamberlain University's Bachelor's in Nursing program, their Accelerated Bachelor's in Nursing program, which is an ABSN. And I just finished the program in April, the very end of April. I sat for my board exam, the NCLEX, in mid-June, and I walked the stage in mid-June. So I've only been a registered nurse for like 2 hot seconds, but in this video I'm going to be talking about my overall experience at the university, and most importantly at the end I'm going to go over whether or not I would recommend you or anybody to do the ABSN program with Chamberlain. And I'm gonna go ahead and put chapters down below because sometimes I tend to talk a lot. I'm gonna try to keep this video brief, but that way you can skip ahead to any portion of the video, especially if you wanna skip ahead just to see whether or not I would recommend the nursing program. Okay, so first things first, if you are familiar with my channel, after I finished each session or each class at Chamberlain, I would come on here and I would give a review of it and talk about my experience and what you can expect when you're going into that session or when you're going into that class. And I feel like, as with most reviews, I feel like I got on here, like on YouTube, and I talked about my experience. Sometimes I would talk about my professors and I'd go into great detail about my frustrations with the university and with the professors. And to be kind of honest, I do feel bad about that. I feel like I spent a lot of time talking about, well, okay, first I'll say this. First, I feel like I came on here and I was really bubbly and I was really positive. And then people were constantly in my comment section like saying, are you a plant for the school? Are you like working with the school? Are you like just trying to highlight the school? And so after that, like maybe halfway through my program or halfway through me doing this on YouTube, I started being really raw and honest. And so I would touch on the good things, but I would also kind of highlight the bad things. And while I'm glad that I was transparent and honest, at the same time, I feel like maybe I highlighted the negative too much. So I will say, throughout my time at Chamberlain, I think I've really only had 3 really terrible professors or 3 bad professors throughout my entire time at Chamberlain. And I had a lot of professors at Chamberlain. I don't know off the top of my head, but I had at least a couple dozen maybe, because I probably took, oh gosh, I definitely took more than 24 classes, so I'm sure I had probably close to a couple dozen professors that I interacted with and that taught me at Chamberlain. And there are only 3 really bad ones that stick out in my mind. And I think only one should, of those 3, only one should not be an educator. So aside from those 3 bad professors that I had, every other professor that I had at Chamberlain was pretty decent. And then I had a handful of professors that really stuck out to me and that really, I thought they were really good. The one thing I would say was that there was a lot of turnover, at least at my campus. I was at the Tyson's Corner campus, and so there was a lot of turnover. Teachers would leave kind of abruptly, or teachers would just not return for a session. And I think that that was more so internal, like maybe something with their leadership. And as far as I know, it didn't have anything to do with the students. So it had nothing to do with me, but teachers, it felt like they were constantly leaving. Or if a teacher was really good and they stayed with Chamberlain, they would get kind of promoted. Professors would leave, good professors would get promoted, and then it felt like their replacement wasn't as good. It felt like something was kind of taken from the students and and it wasn't given back at the same quality, if that makes sense. But overall, there were really good professors at Chamberlain, and I feel like I didn't highlight that enough throughout the videos that I made on this channel. I feel like I focused on the really bad ones when I had them, and I didn't really highlight the really good ones when I had them. So that is one thing that I will say was a positive, at least at my campus. Every campus is different, that's one thing. And then a second thing is, like I said, there's a lot of turnover. So the professors that I encountered at the Tyson's Corner campus may not all be there if you're attending university 1, 2, 3, 4 years after I did. Another really big thing to consider with Chamberlain was that my experience was very unique. because I attended the evening and weekend program. Also, side note, I apologize if you guys hear noise in the background. Hopefully it's not picking up. I'm filming right in front of a window, and I live in Maryland in a very wooded area, and there's cicadas, and so they're always making noise in the summertime. So hopefully that's not getting picked up on the camera. If it is, I apologize if it's distracting. But back to what I was saying, I attended the evening and weekend program. Every campus does not have an evening and weekend option. So I get these questions a lot, and I'm gonna go ahead and just answer them really quickly. People always ask me, was my program online? No, it was not. I started Chamberlain in 2021, in May of 2021. So the pandemic was still a thing. I mean, the pandemic is still a thing now, but obviously in 2020, everything shut down. Everything was closed, everything was online, nothing was in person. And so when I started at Chamberlain, we were kind of at the tail end of that, especially in my area. So I'm in the DC metropolitan area. Tyson's Corner is in Virginia. You know, Virginia's in the South, DC is in the South, Maryland's in the South, and I'm not gonna get political, but a lot of the southern states were more lenient, and they definitely went back to being in person a lot sooner than northern states. But since Maryland, DC, and Virginia are kind of right on the cusp of the Mason-Dixon line, even though we're all southern states, it took a while for things to go back in person. So when I started at Chamberlain, it was kind of like this weird period where I think some Chamberlain campuses were back to being in person, others were fully online. Mine was kind of a hybrid. So those first couple classes that I took, I think were online, and then I got to a point in the program after maybe 1 or 2 sessions where lectures were online, but then I had to go in person for exams. And then once I was at Chamberlain for a couple of sessions, everything was in person. But so all of that was only because of the pandemic. The evening and weekend option is in person. So I would say like 90% of my program that I completed was in person. It was just those first few months where it was kind of like online, kind of a weird hybrid. But once we went back to normal, everything was in person. So my lectures were in person, my exams were in person, clinicals were definitely in person. We had to go to the hospital. Everything was I had to go on campus or to the hospital to do for my program. So that's that. I get a lot of questions on that for the evening and weekend program. There is an online option for Chamberlain University at some campuses. And when I first started at Chamberlain in 2021, I think the evening and weekend program was relatively new for the campus. The online program was not an option. If it was, I would have done it. The online program came about while I was, like after I already started. That's when my campus adapted an online option. But by then I was just used to going in person. I did think about switching programs within the same university, within the same campus. I thought about switching from evening and weekend and instead doing online, but ultimately I decided not to, and I think it was a good choice for me. So all of that was a long-winded way to say, if you're watching this video or if you're thinking about Chamberlain, if you would be a daytime student or if you would even be an online student, your experience would probably be very different than what my experience was at the university. It just depends on what type of program you decide to do. So with all that being said, I did feel like, if I'm being completely honest, I did sometimes feel like a second-class citizen to the daytime students, being an evening and weekend student. And I know that a lot, if not all, of the people in the evening and weekend program voiced to me, like at least in my cohort, that there were points of the program or certain points in the program where they felt like second-class citizens as well. There were speakers that would come to campus. There were activities that would happen on campus, like in the student lounge, especially during exams. There were just certain things that the daytime students had access to and the evening and weekend students didn't, because we weren't on campus during the day. I think I said this in one of my videos. I didn't find out until my 3rd year at Chamberlain. It's a 3-year program. I didn't find out till year 3 that there was a cafe in the building. When I had to go to campus on the weekend, some of the daytime students were like, oh, we can go to the cafe for lunch. And they were like arguing amongst themselves, like, I don't think the cafe is open on the weekend. And I was just like, what? There's a cafe? What are you talking about? So the cafe was only available, I guess, for lunch or whatever. It wasn't available for dinner time. So that was something, that's a major resource that our tuition is going toward as evening and weekend students that we didn't have access to, which I didn't think was fair. And so that's something I've been very vocal about, I think, on this channel. But again, mind you, that's my experience as an evening and weekend student. If you're looking to go to the daytime program, I do think that the school has a fair bit of resources, there are job fairs. Like, I feel like with the daytime students, you can kind of physically see a little bit more where your money is going to, because Chamberlain is a very expensive school. And so if you're a daytime student, you will have more access to resources than the evening and weekend students do, and the online students, depending on what their schedule is outside of school. And I will also say that my experience was unique to me because I had to work full-time while I was in the program. So I was an evening and weekend student. I worked full-time during the weekdays. So there were evening and weekend students in my cohort that were involved in, like, we had, I think, an SGA. I don't even know all the stuff that we had because I was just focused on work. But there was SGA, which is Student Government Association. There was the Student Nurses Association. There were different honor societies. So there are different ways to get involved in campus. And I know at graduation, a lot of people in my cohort that were in the evening and weekend program, they were able to participate in a lot of those things. So it's not like those things are shut off to evening and weekend students. I feel like it's just harder. Like, if you're attending the evening and weekend program, oftentimes it's because you have other obligations during the day or other obligations outside of school. And so that can interfere with a lot of the meetings for these clubs and a lot of the activities on campus. But that's to say, even if you are an evening and weekend student, you still have the opportunity to attend these things. It's just that oftentimes these things are only available during the weekday. So if you don't have any other obligations, then you won't have the same issues that I did. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I feel like I always give that disclaimer. My experience was unique to me because I was, one, an evening and weekend student, and two, because when I was not in class or when I was not in clinical, I was working 40 to 50 hours a week at my job. Now I'm going to talk about the actual content of the program, which I think is the most important thing of any nursing program, because you can get into nursing school, you can be passing all of your exams, but if the content is easy, if you're not learning what you're supposed to be learning, then you're not going to pass the NCLEX, which is the board exam, and you're not going to make a good nurse. So in my opinion, the content at Chamberlain University was amazing. I have friends who have gone to other nursing programs, who are currently in other nursing programs, who are at community college, and I would talk to them and I felt like the stuff that I was learning and the stuff that was on my syllabus was either on par, so right at the same level, or better than all of my friends. So the content was exactly what we needed to learn. So I took my NCLEX about a month and a half after finishing classes, and I did get Archer. I did study a lot. Archer taught me a lot, but for the most part, most of it was a review. And so I was able to pass my NCLEX on the first try in 85 questions. And I feel like I would not have been able to do that without Chamberlain's curriculum being as good as it was. Now, with that being said, it goes back to the professors. Unfortunately, sometimes you do get a bad professor. And while a lot of bad professors like to say that your success and failure is dependent on you, while that is true, I think that a bad professor can hinder your success. So that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes you're going to get a bad professor. Sometimes you're going to get a professor that kind of gets in the way of your learning. But I do believe that if every teacher at Chamberlain was teaching the content that they're supposed to be teaching in the way that Chamberlain's standard is, I feel like it's an excellent program. One thing that I did not like, though, was I felt like things were constantly changing at Chamberlain. Policies were constantly changing. The way things that were done were constantly changing. So we had a software that we would kind of do a version of online clinicals. They didn't replace clinicals for me, but they were kind of like supplemental. It was iHuman. And I think I can't remember now, there were so many changes, but they had iHuman, they got rid of it, they got it back. They had a certain way of doing exams. They got rid of that, they changed it. There were just so many different things. And so from the time that I started at Chamberlain, I feel like the structure of the curriculum was amazing when I first started at Chamberlain. By the time that I graduated, I didn't like it. So that's also something to consider. If the structure was the same, like if the end of my program was how my entire program was, I don't know how prepared I would have been for the NCLEX. So many changes were implemented throughout my time there that, you know, I don't know if those changes were good. Only time will tell, you know, with the NCLEX scores, I'm sure that that's how they measure everything. But I felt like the beginning of my time in the program was more focused on teaching us content, and as we're going along, kind of making sure that we understand that content, versus toward the end of my program, it just kind of felt like they were just throwing exams at us and kind of giving us exams with a ridiculous amount of questions. There was a software that they used to help prep us for the NCLEX, and that software would give us anywhere from like 500 to 5,000 practice questions that we had to do, like exam style questions that we had to do on our own time within a 1 to 2 week span. And at least for me, I don't learn by just people throwing questions at me and me just kind of answering them. So I didn't like that. That's kind of what Chamberlain's curriculum has turned into. By next session, they could have changed it to something totally different. And that is the thing. Any nursing program that you're going to go to is going to have a lot of changes. Healthcare in general, that's how the hospital is. Policies change all the time. Things are constantly changing. And I feel like people are constantly complaining that they like things the way that they used to be and not how they are now. So, I mean, you can take that with a grain of salt. But I will just say, for me personally, I feel like 3 years ago, the curriculum at Chamberlain for me was better for my learning style than what it evolved into by the time that I left. But I'll just wrap up that thought by reiterating that the actual content, so what you were learning at Chamberlain, I do feel like that is adequate enough to pass the NCLEX and to become a pretty decent nurse. And so just to summarize my overall experience at Chamberlain, I would say that it was overall really positive. Like I said, I thought the content was great. I feel like the curriculum of the program did prepare me for the NCLEX to pass it on my first try. In terms of resources, like I said, I really did not benefit from a lot of the resources because of my personal schedule, but the resources are there. There are clubs that you can join. There are organizations that you can join for community, because it's not like a traditional university where there's housing and dormitories. So if you are younger, like if you're fresh out of high school, maybe you're 18, 19, and you're looking for that college feel, at least for my campus, Chamberlain was not that. You're not going to get the dormitory style living because people don't live on campus. But if you are looking for community, it is there. And then in terms of the curriculum, I personally did not like it towards the end of the program, but it's constantly changing. So by the time that you get to Chamberlain or whatever you're doing right now, you may enjoy what the school is doing. And what I didn't like about the curriculum may be eradicated by the time that you're watching this video, because things change so rapidly. And again, it's important to remember that every nursing program is like that. No nursing school is perfect. There were times where I would be so frustrated with the university and with the faculty there. And I would talk to my friends who were also in nursing programs at different schools, and they would have some of the same issues or worse. So no matter where you go, it's not going to be perfect. And I felt like Chamberlain was comparable to other universities. I didn't feel like I was dealing with anything that was so ridiculous that other universities were not going through. And so overall, would I recommend Chamberlain's nursing program? Yes. I would. I think that it's a great program overall for all the reasons that I just listed. The one thing that I always say about Chamberlain is that it is ridiculously expensive. My tuition was lower because I I transferred in with a bunch of credits. This was not my first or my second degree, and then I also took some prerequisites for the nursing program at community college. So I transferred in with like 30 something credits. So I was able to have a reduced tuition. But the program, if you're doing all of your classes inside of the program when I completed it was about $90,000. Some campuses were, I think, like 91 or 92. And as we all know, with the economy, things are only going up. So I'm sure every year tuition is going to go up. So, you know, it's very close to 6 figures for a bachelor's degree, which I think is insane. But I will say, and I don't know if I've said this before, but Chamberlain is a private university. So the idea of paying 6 figures or close to 6 figures for one degree, which is a bachelor's degree, while that is insane to me and I will never accept it, if you compare it to other private universities, it is pretty on par. You cannot compare Chamberlain's tuition to a community college, because community college is a fraction of the cost, or to a state school, because if you're paying in-state tuition at a public university, it's also going to be a fraction of the cost. But if you look up Chamberlain University's tuition compared to any other private university, it's pretty on par with what a bachelor's degree costs nowadays, unfortunately. So there are definitely cheaper ways to get a nursing degree. I would always recommend going the cheaper route. So for me personally, Chamberlain was the best route for me to get my degree where I was just in my personal life and the stage I was in life. The fact that I wanted to just get my degree as quick as possible, and Chamberlain was the fastest way for me to get my degree. And then again, the fact that I already had previous degrees and I was able to transfer in with a bunch of credits, so I did not have to take out a $90,000 loan. My tuition was significantly less than that, and I was able to work full-time at a pretty decent job throughout the entire program, so that helped with my tuition. So for my particular situation, Chamberlain was the best option for me, and I stand by that. And even completing the program, I'm really happy and I have no regrets that this is the route that I chose. If you are in a different place in life, if you have the option to get your degree from a cheaper source, I would recommend doing that over going to Chamberlain, just because I don't think it is wise for anybody to take out, you know, $90,000 worth of loans for a degree. If you're in a situation where, like, you've done the military and they're paying for your education, or you have a scholarship, or you are at a job where they're giving you tuition reimbursement, or you're like me and you're transferring in with a bunch of different credits or money for whatever reason, you're blessed and money is not a problem for you and you have that type of money to put into your tuition, then I would say 100% no reservations, go with Chamberlain. But I cannot stress that enough. Taking out $90,000 worth of loans is not the best financial decision in my opinion. And so that is it for this video. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel because it helps me out a lot. If you have any questions, you can comment down below, or you can shoot me an email if it's private. I always put my email in the description box below. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.